If I had to choose what I believe is the most interesting genre when it comes to video games, I would probably say horror games, because while I'll always love RPGs more than anything else thanks to their deep combat systems, over-the-top stories, and just pure insanity when it comes to villains, horror games have this strange, special feeling to them no other game can match, and the best way to describe what I mean by this is by taking a look at horror movies. Horror movies can be incredibly unsettling, whether it's some gory film with a psycho killer or a creepy ghost haunting a cast of characters. These type of movies can make people close their eyes or look away at times to get away from what's happening in front of them because of that uneasiness they feel from these things. And that feeling is truly magnifying in so many horror games because you lose the ability to close your eyes or look away since you aren't just watching, you're directly involved and engaging with what's happening in front of you, creating a truly interesting dynamic that you really can't get anywhere else, and is why I have such a soft spot for horror games. There's something addicting about fearing that next step you have to take that I love so much, which there's no game that I feel masters that fear more than Fatal Frame. A game I first played over 20 years ago that instantly grabbed my attention thanks to just how different it felt to play compared to other horror games I was playing at that time, like Resident Evil and Silent Hill. Instead of getting different melee weapons or guns that would really empower me as a player, giving me that confidence to take on any undead nightmares I came across, all Fatal Frame gave me was a simple camera to take on the terrifying spirits that haunt the halls of this creepy mansion, which what truly makes this idea so cool is the fact that you don't have that clarity of what's happening around you like you do when using a gun in these other games. You're staring down a camera that funnels your vision, forcing you to truly face what's in front of you, thus truly creating a tense gameplay style that is very engaging. Though before I rant on about the gameplay and everything else about Fatal Frame, like the oddly strange horror outside of the game, there will be spoilers for the game, so consider this your warning. Now, Fatal Frame's gameplay from the outside may look very simple, and in truth, it honestly is when you look at each individual mechanic of the game. But once you see how all the mechanics are used together, you realize how much these mechanics not only bring the gameplay together, but how they are used to enhance the horror experience the game is striving for. First off, your movement is very simple. You can walk or run. Both feel very slow, which is one of my biggest complaints of the franchise as a whole. I always feel like a snail when moving around in these games, but on the other hand, that movement speed makes the encounters you have with the various spirits you battle that much more intense, because you can't just always run away. There are times when you will find yourself not only cornered to where you have to try and dodge a spirit, but you are actively punished for trying to run away against spirits like the blinded, which is where having the ability as simple as performing a quick 180 becomes an important tool in your arsenal, since it's a great way to react to the spirits attacking you when your slow movement won't be enough to get away. Not to mention, unlike enemies in various games back when Fatal Frame first came out, the spirits you battle can travel right through objects or follow you into different rooms, so they are constantly in and out of sight, creating a very disorienting type of combat encounter, which at least for me at the time was very cool to engage with and felt unique, even if it was frustrating for me sometimes. Though luckily, thanks to the camera Obscura, you have various ways to combat these style of encounters. Now, the camera Obscura is such a cool idea to me. The thought of battling spirits through taking pictures of them just makes perfect sense when you just look at the history of the world and how many people claim to have captured something that wasn't there in photos. Not to mention with how creepy so many of these spirits look in Fatal Frame, knowing you have to stare them down through this camera just enhances the fear part of the game, and the mechanics of the camera Obscura reward facing that fear as well. But what are those mechanics? Well, when looking down the camera Obscura, you will notice all the information you need is presented in almost a triangle-like shape. Up top is your filament, which will glow brighter based on how close you are to facing the direction the spirit is in, which is super useful since you need some indicator to know where they are at with how much they move in and out of walls, or else this experience would be extremely annoying. Also, this filament is visible on the bottom right of your screen when not looking down the camera Obscura, so when you do have to reposition for a better angle on a spirit, you still have an idea where they are at. Also, speaking of bottom right, when looking down the camera obscura, you will find a blue bar alongside two other things. The blue bar itself represents your life force, showing how many attacks you can take before you go down. The next to that blue bar is a small square with a stone mirror fragment. If this is glowing, you know you have a fragment in your inventory, which on death you will be resurrected with this item. Both of these can also be seen when not looking down the camera obscura during battles as well. Then above the blue bar is a number indicating how many spirit stones you have, which are used whenever you fire off one of the camera obscura's bonus functions, which I'll get to here in a bit. But the symbol in the circle by the spirit stone number indicates what bonus function you have equipped. Then next, on the bottom left side of the screen when looking down the camera obscura, you will see what type of film you have equipped alongside how many of that film type you have. Because like any good gun found in a horror game, there is ammo to find, or in this case the film I just mentioned, which comes in 4 different types, each type featuring a different number. The higher the number, the more powerful the film is, and what is probably the most important resource in the game. I say this because while I wouldn't say Fatal Frame is a hard game, I would say it can be challenging on a first playthrough if you know nothing about the game, like the fact that there really isn't a limit to how many enemies you can fight in a playthrough. When wandering around aimlessly, you can get into random encounters with various ghosts. If you spend too much time lost, this could be a massive drain on all your resources. Though I could probably argue that your 2 main forms of healing, which is herbal medicine and sacred water, could be more important than film, or even something like this stone mirror I mentioned earlier. But I'll always say film is the most important resource on the first playthrough, because while spirits can absolutely destroy you in 2 shots later on in the game, if you run out of film, you are basically screwed, and no amount of healing is going to save you, which I believe the devs understood this when making Fatal Frame, since you can get a refill of Type 14 film if your supply is below 30 at any save point, and after playing back through the game after all these years, I could easily see people running out of film for a variety of reasons. Though on the bright side, when starting New Game Plus, this isn't so much of a worry, since not only will you understand the game way better, but your resources carry over, and your camera obscura will most likely be decked out with the various upgrades available to it, make it even the weakest film a force to be reckoned with. Because the camera obscura has 3 different upgrade types available to it. First, you have the basic functions. These improve the final mechanic I haven't mentioned yet when looking down the camera obscura, which is your charge gauge. As you maintain focus on a spirit, a circle of symbols will start charging up. At least this is how it is on the Xbox version compared to the PS2 version, which uses a row of symbols instead. But the higher the charge, the more powerful the shot will be, and the more damage you will do to a spirit. Which I should mention, the spirits you battle health bars can actually also be seen on the top left when looking down the camera obscura. But this charge gauge will reset if you stop looking down the camera obscura for any reason, or will slowly go down over time if you don't maintain focus on a spirit when looking down it. I really love the mechanic of this. It's such a cool gameplay style that feels so different from anything else. But getting back to the basic functions you can upgrade, these increase things like how fast the charge gauge fills up or how much damage it does. Then next you have the bonus functions that uses the spirit stones I mentioned earlier. There are 5 of these, and you can only have 1 equipped at a time, but these do things like paralyzing a ghost in place or pushing them back. Which, as cool as these are, they really don't play too much of a factor when playing through the game. Since upgrades can be very expensive, you will only be able to upgrade your camera so much on a first playthrough, which as a new player, you will probably ask yourself at some point if it's really worth wasting your spirit points on these bonus functions with limited uses, which spirit points is the currency you earn from taking pictures of spirits, or are you going to upgrade the basic functions of the camera obscura since they will always be relevant to you no matter what. This seems like an easy choice, at least it was for me, though I will say those bonus functions become a lot more useful in repeated playthroughs. Then finally, you have your special function upgrades, which are unlocked through various means, like completing the game on different difficulties. These functions don't use spirit stones and have cool effects like advanced tracking of spirits. Then just like bonus functions, you can only have 1 special function active at a time. I've always enjoyed these more since they aren't tied to spirit stones, and they make repeated playthroughs of the game that much more interesting, but that pretty much covers the main mechanics of Fatal Frame, though a few other things to note is when you're looking down the camera Obscura, you can not only flip a 180, but also move around slowly and increase the speed of looking around, which can be very useful at times. Though if I had one big complaint about all these mechanics, going back to the movement, while it generally feels good despite being slow, not having true tank controls like Resident Evil can make flipping between camera angles feel wonky at times. Plus, it seems like it's so easy to get caught on endless random invisible objects, which is also super annoying. And I can't forget to mention there's no walking backwards in this game, at least when you're not looking down the camera, so you will be flipping 180s left and right if you're super used to classic tank controls. Though on the bright side, the run button basically works without using the thumbstick, so you can kind of steer the main character Miku without the change in angles messing with you. Though for me, it can be very touching trying to be precise when turning her this way, though I suppose that's probably a skill issue on my part. But outside of that, I really have no issues with the gameplay. It really is such a fun and weird style of gameplay that you really can't get anywhere else, which the biggest driving force of that is probably the variety of enemies you encounter that puts all aspects of these mechanics to work. For how old or when Fatal Frame released, the enemy variety is crazy and so many of them truly feel unique to engage with. You have the blinded that reacts to sound and will teleport behind you if you try to run. The headless priest will hide their head so you can't charge up your shot on them. Wandering monk is an asshole. That's all that really needs to be said about him. And this list goes on. Each spirit is like its own level to master, with some being a true test of your skills, since if you want to maximize your chance to take them down, then you want to perform what is basically known as a zero shot, or what I like to call the parry of Fatal Frame, where usually at the last moment when the charging circle turns orange, or in this case red, since once again they felt the need to make changes with the Xbox version, you can stop a spirit dead in its tracks mid-attack and get a bunch of bonus points for landing one of these. Which there's different types of shots you can land based on a variety of factors, from how close the spirit is to you to how many you capture in a single shot, which it could be pretty fun going for these different kind of shots, definitely when playing in battle mode, a mode that is unlocked after you complete the main story, which features 20 missions where you battle spirits in a variety of situations that really puts your skills to the test, since instead of just battling one spirit at a time like you mainly see throughout the story outside of a few instances, you will be thrown into multiple different battles featuring combinations of spirits that could be a real pain to deal with. Definitely when going for an S ranking in these missions, which is basically based off of the quality of the shots you take in these missions. But it's a ton of fun, and I always found it to be the easiest way to farm spirit points for upgrades or get a better understanding of the spirit's patterns. So when you start a second playthrough on a higher difficulty, you're much more prepared, which it's very worth doing a second playthrough, since you will not only get a greater challenge, but find new things like additional spirits and alternate endings waiting for you if you succeed. Though I should probably talk about where the game actually takes place and what you're doing inside this place besides fighting spirits. So the entire game takes place in an old Japanese mansion outside of Tokyo called the Himuro Mansion, which if you were me back when I first played Fatal Frame, you would have thought this was a real place and that the game's story was based off of what happened in it. Because right on the box of the Western version of Fatal Frame, you will find the words, based on a true story. Though now that I'm older and not so gullible, I've realized this is just simply not true, or at least from what I could find, the Himuro Mansion was never a real place, outside of some urban legends talking about abandoned mansions that are cursed, or that maybe there was a place so cursed that it was destroyed to contain the evil. There's nothing I could find to suggest anything about Fatal Frame was remotely based on any real-world locations. But that's okay, because it's a video game, and as a location for a video game, it's brilliant. From the claustrophobic spaces to the framing of areas with both fixed and moving camera angles, exploring this location is so much fun, and it all ties back to the spirits you fight in the game. Not only because of how different each of them can be to fight, but because since they can move through objects and walls, it makes the layouts of rooms and the framing of them through the camera angles feel very different when engaging in combat against the various spirits you come across in them. Not to mention, facing the same kind of spirits can even feel completely different based on the room you fight them in. Though at the same time, You can't make every room fit every spirit type, so there will be times when you battle a spirit in an area that just doesn't mesh well with them, and this can be very annoying. I'm looking at you wondering, Monk, you are still an asshole. Thankfully though, when you're not tackling with the various spirits of the Himuro mansion, there's plenty of other stuff to do like solving puzzles. Puzzles in Fatal Frame and just in general trying to figure out what to do next can be simple but obscure at times. While you do have a map you can glance at to get an idea of where you have and haven't been, the game vaguely guides you to your objective through random spirits that try to lead you in the proper direction, which I should also mention these spirits and many other non-hostile ones can be captured in photos for bonus spirit points, so it's worth doing even at the risk of wasting film that may be useful in battles or for helping you solve the obscure puzzles I mentioned. I say this because the camera obscura is used in a variety of ways outside of battle, from fighting hidden doors to revealing the answers to puzzles. The camera obscura is truly an all-in-one utility item that makes it even more interesting as a central gameplay mechanic, since it really plays into that resource management side of things when it comes to survival horror games. But outside of using the camera, you have your usual kind of puzzles, from sliding stones in the right order to reading notes or scraps of papers to get the answer to locked doors, which overall, I like the puzzles of Fatal Frame. They might not do anything too crazy, but they feel just right for this kind of game, and between the backtracking you have to do alongside managing your resources, it's a survival horror experience that is well executed despite its flaws. I mean, the game even lets you favorite various pictures you take while making your way through the game in what I would call the most cursed photo album in the world, which is kind of cool. Though I should now probably talk about why we are in this cursed mansion to begin with. So we take on the role of Miku, who travels to the Himuro mansion to find her lost brother Mafuyu after he's been gone for over 2 weeks, which after playing through a prologue as him in which we learn he's there to look for his mentor, whose own reason for being there is to do research for a book he plans to write. But after seeing what appears to be Mafuyu falling victim to some kind of spirit, we take over as Miku, which after finding her brother's dropped camera obscura, she then goes on to start figuring out what happened in this mansion and to her brother. This entire setup is well done and helps create this sense of mystery on what's really happening in this place. Though I will say the English voice acting does nothing to help this. There's more life in 3-day-old microwaved pizza than what the voice actors give to this game, but it does add a charm to the game that makes you laugh.
I felt uneasy, like he was going far away.
Though I don't want to discredit all the voice acting, because voices of the spirits are really well done. It's like comparing the highest tier of voice actor to the lowest, and I have no idea how this happened. But getting back to the story, the game takes place over 4 nights, each of these nights handling their own theme as part of the cursed ritual that happened in the Himuro mansion, known as the Strangling Ritual, in which a maiden is sacrificed and ripped apart with ropes that then get soaked in her blood to hold back the gates of hell. This approach makes for an interesting way to deliver a story, since all the notes, spirits, and puzzles you deal with help you understand what happened in this mansion and what the importance of each part of the ritual was. So basically, the game isn't throwing everything at you at once. It really does a good job of building up to the conclusion of not only the story, but what happened to the various people throughout the history of this place. Also, another interesting thing about when a new night starts is they act as resets. Each night will not only restore you to full health if you're below it, but it also respawns all the items in the mansion, so you can routinely restock on important items as long as you remember where they are at. Which I should quickly note, when running around collecting these items, or anything important for that matter, you can not only move the flashlight around that you are holding, but Miku will turn her head to look at objects that may be important, which I always thought was a nice little detail, but as I was saying, going around collecting these respawn items can be a lifesaver as long as you believe the risk is worth the reward, which is something I wish I could say about the final boss of the game. What I mean by this is the final boss, Kirie, is super disappointing. You get through the entire game learning she was born to be a shrine maiden who was supposed to be sacrificed to keep the gates of hell closed and the calamity at bay, but she ends up falling in love with a man, which taints her heart, keeping her from fully accepting her duty as a shrine maiden, causing her to become corrupted with malice after death, which leads to her cursing anyone she comes into contact with inside the mansion, making them feel the same sorrow and pain she felt. Which her appearance is truly creepy, and throughout the game as you progress the story, she not only curses Miku at the end of each night, but you have these moments where she chases you and the only thing you can do is run, creating this feeling of this is a truly evil and powerful spirit. But when you finally get to fight her, she's one of the easiest spirits to fight in the game, which is so disappointing. Her moveset is bland, she just doesn't do much. Like, how do you waste something that looks like this? Some of you might not agree with me, but I found this so disappointing, unlike the soundtrack of the game, if you can even call it that. If I could describe the soundtrack in one simple way, it's atmosphere. There really isn't much in terms of music outside of the over-the-top main menu theme song that sounds like something out of Parasite Eve. Or the mellow end credits music you hear after surviving this nightmare-filled mansion. But I really enjoyed this approach they took because it really lets the power of silence be the driving force of fear. While I'll always love the music in games like Resident Evil, there's something disturbing about always being in silence with just the most obscure sounds or noises playing that is just unmatched in building tension towards that next encounter, which complements the art style very well. While graphically it hasn't aged the best compared to other games of its time, the realistic style of the mansion and spirits just carries so strongly to this day. Not to mention the approach to incorporate these black and white scenes really amplifies this style in such a cool way, which really everything this game presents to the player wouldn't be possible without one of the strangest creators in gaming behind it, Makoto Shibata. Makoto is the creator of the Fatal Frame series, and he's a very interesting man to say the least. While there's too many to list here, he has gone on record talking endlessly about different paranormal experiences he has had not only growing up, but while working on this series. From seeing a haunted procession going down the road and fearing what would happen if he took pictures of it when he was a kid, to seeing a long-haired woman in his own home as an adult. These experiences help shape the Fatal Frame series in ways other games cannot hope to replicate, because he has taken his real-world experiences and twisting them to fit into these games. And it's not even just him. From fellow devs singing strange things to voice actors hearing sounds, everyone around the Fatal Frame games have had paranormal experiences that they couldn't explain, and these experiences have also influenced these games' development over the years as well. Which, while I'm not a big believer in the paranormal, stuff like this is just so fascinating to me, and it really shows how the Fatal Frame series was able to carve such a unique experience compared to its fellow horror games. Which I guess, in a way, when you look at the experiences surrounding the development of the game, maybe that based on a true story tagline isn't as black as white as it seems. But with that said, Fatal Frame history will always be one for the books. From the experiences of the dev team and voice actors, to the differences between versions that range from reworking the camera Obscura's layout, to certain cutscenes not working in the Xbox versions, which I should say is oddly creepy when you're playing the game alone with the lights off. Like really, tell me that's not creepy. But jokes aside, Fatal Frame was a truly one-of-a-kind experience for its time, and to a certain extent still is to this day, which is why I will always recommend this series to anyone who is even remotely interested in horror games.